When my son Ethan screamed those words, "Please don't make me go back," I thought it was just another tantrum, the kind every 6-year-old throws when he doesn't get what he wants. But that scream, that raw, broken sound coming from his tiny body, it wasn't just fear, it was terror. It was the kind of scream that chills a mother's heart to the bone, the kind that whispers, "Something is deeply wrong." That morning had started like any other. I was standing in front of the mirror, trying to cover the dark circles under my eyes with a cheap drugstore concealer, pretending that everything in my life was fine. My husband, David, had already left for work, or so I thought, and Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, poking at his cereal with a spoon, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Eat your breakfast, sweetheart," I said gently. He didn't answer. Lately, that silence had become normal. Ethan used to be the kind of child who talked about everything: dinosaurs, superheroes, the color of clouds. But since he had started spending weekends at his father's parents' house, something had changed. He'd come home quieter, jumpy. Sometimes, I'd find him sitting alone in his room, rocking slightly, whispering to himself. I had asked David about it once, but he brushed it off like I was overreacting. "He's fine, Julia," he'd said. "My parents adore him. You know that." But I didn't know that anymore. That morning, when I told Ethan it was time to pack his little backpack for another weekend with Grandma and Grandpa, his spoon fell from his hand and clattered against the bowl. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, his lip trembling. "Please, Mom," he whispered. "Please don't make me go back there." I froze. "Why, sweetheart? What happened?" He just shook his head violently, tears spilling down his cheeks. I don't wanna." "Please, Mommy, don't make me go." I knelt beside him, brushing his hair back, trying to soothe him. "Ethan, honey, if something's wrong, you have to tell me." But before he could answer, a knock came from the door, sharp, heavy. David's voice. "Julia, open up. We're going to be late." "Late?" I frowned. "You said you had a meeting in the city today." He didn't reply, just kept knocking. I picked Ethan up and opened the door, my heart already uneasy. David stood there in his suit, smiling, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached his eyes. His hand was clenched around his phone, his jaw tight. "Come on," he said to Ethan, holding out his hand. "We're heading to my parents." Ethan backed away behind me. "No, I don't want to go. Please, Mom." David's expression hardened. "Julia, don't start this again. You always fill his head with nonsense." "I don't fill his head with anything," I shot back. "Look at him, David. He's terrified." David crouched down, his voice turning soft, too soft. "Buddy, you know Grandma and Grandpa love you. Don't make them sad, okay?" But Ethan only started crying harder. His small hands clutched at my shirt, his body trembling. "Don't leave me there." "Mommy, please, please." That's when I felt it. The cold wave of dread crawling through my spine. Something was happening to my son. Something dark. "David," I said slowly, "you need to tell me what's going on. Has something happened there?" He straightened up, his face blank. "Stop over-dramatizing everything, Julia. He's a kid. He probably just misses you." But Ethan's screams told a different story. I hugged him tightly, feeling his heartbeat hammering against my chest. "If he doesn't want to go, he's staying here." David's calm facade cracked for the first time. His voice rose. "Julia, you're not going to start this custody drama again. The court order is clear. He spends weekends with my parents. End of discussion. Custody." That word always hit me like a slap. When David and I divorced 2 years ago, we agreed on shared custody. During the week, Ethan stayed with me. Weekends, he went to his father's. It was supposed to be simple, but nothing about David had ever been simple. I stood my ground. "Not this weekend. He's not going." David's eyes darkened. "Julia, you're being ridiculous." Ethan's sobs echoed in the hallway. "Mommy, please." I could feel the neighbors watching through the thin walls of our apartment building, hearing everything. The shame, the helplessness, it all mixed with the growing fear clawing inside me. David stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Julia, if you keep this up, I'll go straight back to court. You want them to think you're unstable again?" That word. Again. He was using my past against me, the months after the divorce, when I'd struggled with panic attacks and exhaustion. when he'd called me unfit in front of a judge. I took a shaky breath, trying not to cry. "You're not taking him today," he smirked. "Watch me." Before I could react, he reached out and grabbed Ethan's arm. Ethan screamed, a sound so raw that something inside me snapped. I lunged forward, yanking David's hand away. "Don't touch him like that." David glared at me, his voice trembling with fury. "You're insane, Julia, absolutely insane." Ethan ran behind me again, crying uncontrollably. That's when I said it. The words that would change everything. "If you try to take him again, I'll call the police." For a second, David froze. Then his lips twisted into a cold smile. "Go ahead. Tell them what? That I'm a father trying to see his son? You'll look like a lunatic again." He turned and left, slamming the door so hard that the picture frames on the wall rattled. For a long moment, the only sound in the apartment was Ethan's quiet sobbing. I knelt down, pulling him close. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe. You're staying with me." But even as I said the words, I knew this wasn't over. Something terrible was happening. Something my son was too scared to talk about, and I was going to find out what it was. That night, Ethan refused to sleep alone. He insisted on staying in my bed, clinging to my arm like a lifeline. Every time I shifted or turned, he'd jolt awake, his little body trembling. At around 3 a.m., I felt his tiny hand move toward mine. His voice, barely above a whisper, broke the silence. "Mommy, if I tell you something, do you promise not to make me go back?" My breath caught in my throat. I turned to face him. "I promise, sweetheart. You can tell me anything." He hesitated, his eyes darting around the dark room like he was afraid someone might hear. Then he said softly, "They lock me in the basement when I don't finish dinner." I froze. "What?" His voice trembled. "Grandpa says it's punishment. Grandma just watches. I don't like the dark, Mommy." Every word hit me like a hammer. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, that my tired mind was twisting his words. But his eyes, those terrified little eyes told the truth. I pulled him into my arms. "Sweetheart, no one will ever lock you up again. I promise." He started crying, his voice muffled against my chest. "I told Daddy, but he said I was lying." My heart cracked. David, the man who was supposed to protect our son, had ignored him. I spent the rest of the night sitting awake, Ethan asleep against my shoulder, my mind racing with fear and rage. When the sun finally came up, I made a decision. I wasn't sending my son back there, not for a single hour, not even if I had to fight David, the courts, or the entire world. The next morning, I went to the police station. I sat across from a young officer, my hands gripping a cold paper cup of coffee. Ethan was sitting beside me, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "I need to report child abuse," I said, my voice shaking. The officer looked up, calm but serious. "Who's the victim?" "My son," I said. "He's 6. Ethan looked up at me, fear in his eyes. I squeezed his hand gently. The officer nodded, pulling a form toward him. "And who's the alleged abuser?" My ex-husband's parents." I watched his expression tighten slightly, that subtle shift people make when they don't quite believe you yet. "Can you describe what happened?" I explained everything Ethan had told me, the basement, the punishments, the fear, but as I spoke, I could feel his skepticism building. "Mrs. Harris," he said slowly, "these are serious allegations." "Do you have any evidence?" I felt my stomach twist. "He's 6. What kind of evidence could he possibly have?" He sighed, typing something into his computer. "We'll make a report, but you'll need to contact Child Protective Services. They'll open an investigation." His tone was polite, but I could hear what he really meant. "Don't get your hopes up." I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek to stop myself from crying. That evening, I got a call from David. "What the hell did you do, Julia?" His voice thundered through the phone. "You know exactly what I did," I snapped. "Your parents hurt our son. They did no such thing." He barked. "Ethan's exaggerating. You've been poisoning his mind against them for months. David, for God's sake, listen to yourself." "He's terrified," he scoffed. "He's a kid." He throws tantrums. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Again. Again." That word again, always thrown at me like a weapon. "Do you even care?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Do you care what they did to him?" There was a long pause. Then, in a quiet, cold tone, he said, "You keep this up, Julia, and I'll take full custody. You'll never see him again." He hung up. For a few seconds, I just stared at my phone, my hands shaking. Then I turned and saw Ethan standing in the hallway, his dinosaur clutched to his chest. He'd heard everything. "Mommy," he whispered, "are they going to make me go back?" I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "No, sweetheart, not ever again." The next day, 2 social workers came to the house. A man and a woman, both kind-faced, but with that careful, professional calm that never reveals what they're thinking. "Mrs. Harris," the woman said gently, "we're here to talk about the report you filed." Ethan hid behind me. Peeking out nervously, they asked questions, endless questions, about his behavior, his father, the grandparents, our home life. I answered everything truthfully, but I could tell what they were really doing, weighing credibility. Was I a hysterical ex-wife trying to punish her ex? Or a mother protecting her child? When they finally left, I felt like I'd been drained of every ounce of strength. Hours later, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from David. "You're going to regret this. Julia." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I deleted the message and saved a screenshot, because something in me knew this fight was only beginning. That night, I found Ethan sleeping in my bed again, his tiny body curled up against my pillow. I sat beside him, brushing his hair back, and whispered to the dark, "Whatever it takes, I'll protect you." But I had no idea how much that promise would cost me. Because the next morning, when I opened my front door to take out the trash, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A dead bird, crushed flat, was lying on the welcome mat. Next to it, a note written in thick black ink. "Stop lying. Julia." The dead bird lay there like a warning, a small, twisted symbol that someone wanted me to be afraid. For a long moment, I just stood on the porch, my breath fogging in the cool morning air. Behind me, I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the quiet house that had once felt safe, now poisoned by fear. I glanced around, scanning the street. Everything looked normal. A man jogging with his dog. Mrs. Benson from across the road watering her plants. But my instinct screamed that something was very, very wrong. I grabbed a tissue, picked up the note, and slipped it into a plastic bag. Then I looked at the bird again. A tiny sparrow, its wings bent at an impossible angle. I whispered under my breath, "What kind of monster does this?" And I already knew the answer. David. It had his fingerprints all over it, not literally, but in spirit. The intimidation, the manipulation, the way he made me feel small and powerless. He'd always been like that. When we first met, he was charming, the kind of man who made everyone laugh. But behind closed doors, that charm turned to control. He'd correct how I spoke, criticize what I wore, decide who I could see. And the first time I stood up to him, he didn't yell, he just smiled. That slow, terrifying smile of someone who already knew how to break you without raising his voice. Now, even though we were divorced, that smile haunted me still. I took Ethan to school that morning, pretending nothing was wrong. I didn't want him to see the fear eating away at me. He was quiet on the drive, staring out the window, his little hands fidgeting in his lap. When we arrived, I crouched beside him and said softly, "Remember, sweetheart, if anyone asks about Grandma and Grandpa, tell the truth, okay?" He nodded silently, but there was something in his eyes. Guilt? Fear? It was as if he believed he had done something wrong. "Hey," I whispered, "none of this is your fault. You hear me?" He gave a tiny nod, then ran toward the school gate, his backpack bouncing with each step. I watched him until he disappeared inside. Then, for the first time in weeks, I cried, right there in the car. Tears streamed down my face, hot and angry. I felt helpless, cornered. I had no one on my side, not the police, not the courts, not David, and yet, I couldn't give up. When I got home, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You're making a huge mistake, Julia. You're going to lose him." I blocked the number immediately, but within minutes, another message came through, different number, same tone. Lying about good people has consequences. My hands were shaking as I dialed Detective Harper. The officer who had taken my statement earlier in the week. "Detective, it's Julia Harris," I said quickly. "Someone's threatening me," he sighed, that weary tone I'd already learned to hate. "What kind of threats?" I explained the messages, the dead bird, the note. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "it could just be someone trying to scare you. I'll make a record of it, but without proof of who sent those messages, there's not much we can do right now." His calm voice made me want to scream. "Detective, what about my son? He's terrified to go back there." "I understand," he said, "but Child Services needs to complete their interviews first. Just try to stay calm, Mrs. Harris. Try to stay calm." Those words echoed in my head long after the call ended. How was I supposed to stay calm when I was being hunted in my own home? That night I didn't sleep. Every sound, the creak of the pipes, the distant barking of a dog, made my heart race. At around midnight, I heard it. A soft knock, 3 gentle taps against the living room window. I froze. My breath hitched. It came again. 3 slow knocks. I tiptoed to the hallway and peeked through the curtains. The front yard was dark, but I could see movement, a shadow slipping behind the hedges. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling, and called 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" "Someone's outside my house," I whispered. "They're knocking on the windows." The dispatcher's calm voice steadied me slightly. "Stay on the line, ma'am. Lock the doors and wait for the officers." I did exactly that. I bolted the front door, shut every window, and ran to Ethan's room. He was still asleep, his little body rising and falling peacefully. Within 10 minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived. Their lights flashed red and blue through my curtains, painting the walls like a warning. I stepped outside, heart hammering. An officer with a flashlight approached. "Ma'am, we checked around. Whoever it was, they're gone. But we found this." He handed me something, a small toy car. Ethan's toy car, except it wasn't his. It was identical. Same model, same color, but it had mud smeared on it, and a note taped underneath, in childish handwriting, "Be quiet, or Mommy gets hurt." My knees nearly gave out. The officer steadied me. "Ma'am, we'll file this as a threat. You need to stay somewhere else tonight." I nodded, barely hearing him. My vision blurred with tears. I packed a few clothes, grabbed Ethan, and drove straight to a motel on the edge of town. Ethan woke up halfway through the drive, rubbing his eyes. "Mommy, where are we going?" "Just somewhere safe, sweetheart," I whispered, forcing a smile. He leaned against me, half asleep. "Did they find Grandpa?" The words froze me. "Why would you ask that, honey?" He mumbled, "Because he said, if I tell you, he'll come for you next." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I realized then, the threat wasn't just intimidation. It was a promise. I didn't sleep that night. Ethan lay beside me in the motel bed, wrapped in the thin white sheets, breathing softly. The steady hum of the air conditioner filled the silence, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Every shadow felt like it was watching me. Every creak of the building made me flinch. I couldn't keep running forever. I needed proof, real, undeniable evidence that would make the police believe me. I turned to look at Ethan, his little hand clutching the edge of his blanket. That innocent face, so peaceful, yet haunted by nightmares he didn't deserve. I whispered to myself, "They'll never touch you again, baby." I swear it. The next morning I drove Ethan to school. He waved goodbye with a tired smile, but I could see the fear in his eyes when I promised to pick him up later. After dropping him off, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the electronics store downtown. The clerk looked surprised when I asked for 3 small hidden cameras with night vision. "Security issue?" he asked. "You could say that," I replied softly. He showed me how to set them up with remote access. I paid in cash. By afternoon, I was parked a few blocks away from David's parents' house, the place Ethan had begged me not to send him back to. The house looked innocent enough. White walls, a neat lawn, a little porch with hanging flowers. But I could feel something dark beneath the surface, something rotten. I waited until their car left the driveway. Then, heart pounding, I grabbed the cameras and slipped through the side gate. I'd lived there once, long ago, during the first year of my marriage. I still remembered every corner. In the kitchen, I placed one camera inside a vent above the counter. Another went behind a bookshelf in the living room. The last one I hid in the basement, the place that haunted Ethan's dreams. When I opened the basement door, a wave of cold air hit me. The smell of damp concrete filled my nose. I descended slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand. At first, everything seemed normal. Boxes, an old washer, shelves of dusty jars. But then, I saw it. A small chain bolted to the wall, just long enough for a child's reach. Next to it lay a thin blanket and a cracked plastic plate. I covered my mouth to stop myself from crying out. My knees went weak. This was where my son had been locked up. I set the camera on the shelf facing the chain, adjusted it, and whispered, "Now we'll see what you've been hiding." Then I left before anyone came back. That night, I sat in the motel room with my laptop open, watching the live feed from the cameras. The images were grainy, the sound faint, but it was something. At around 7:30, David's parents came home. His mother, Irene, was carrying grocery bags. His father, Walter, followed behind, muttering something under his breath. They went about their evening routine, cooking, watching TV. But every word they spoke made my stomach turn. "You think she'll really go through with it?" Irene asked, slicing vegetables. Walter snorted. "That woman's all talk, always has been. Besides, David will fix it. He knows how to handle her." "Handle me," I muttered under my breath, gripping the edge of the table. Then, suddenly, Irene's voice changed, low and venomous. "You should have seen the brat yesterday, crying like a baby just because I told him no dinner until he finished his chores." Walter laughed. "He's too soft, needs to learn respect." Just like his mother never did. My chest tightened. I hit record on all 3 feeds. Every second of their cruelty was now being saved. But then came the part that made my blood run cold. Irene walked to a drawer, pulled something out, and set it on the table. The camera caught it clearly, a small leather belt. "He'll learn next time," she said, "one way or another." I closed my laptop, trembling with rage and horror. There it was, proof. No one could call this exaggeration. No one could say I was making it up. The next morning, I called Detective Harper again. "I have video evidence," I said firmly. "From the house. I want you to see it." He hesitated. "Mrs. Harris, how did you obtain this evidence?" "I placed hidden cameras." "Without a warrant?" "Yes," I said quickly. "But you'll see. It's real. It's happening. Please, just look." He sighed but agreed to meet at the station. I brought my laptop, shaking as I opened the videos. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing as Irene appeared on screen, laughing as she held the belt. When it ended, he sat back slowly. "Mrs. Harris," he said finally, "I'm not supposed to condone what you did, but this changes everything." "Will they arrest them?" I asked, barely able to breathe. He nodded. "They will, and if what your son said checks out, they won't be seeing him again." I covered my face and began to cry, not from fear this time, but from relief. That night, when Ethan came home from school, I knelt down and hugged him tight. "Mommy, what's wrong?" he asked softly. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart," I whispered. "Everything's going to be okay now." He didn't understand yet, but soon he would. Because the next morning, there was a knock at David's parents' door, and this time, it wasn't me. It was 2 police officers holding a warrant. When the police cars pulled up in front of David's parents' house the next morning, I was sitting in my car across the street, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The morning sun cast long shadows on the quiet neighborhood. Birds chirped, sprinklers hissed. The world looked so normal, so peaceful, yet my heart was pounding like I was watching a battlefield unfold. 2 officers got out, their boots crunching on the driveway gravel. They approached the front door and knocked firmly. Inside, movement. Curtains twitched. Irene appeared in the doorway wearing her floral robe, confusion written all over her face. "Can I help you, officers?" she asked with a shaky smile. One of them held up a paper. "Ma'am, we have a warrant for your arrest and for your husband's. Charges include child abuse and unlawful confinement." For a split second, Irene froze. Then she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "There must be some mistake," she said. "We love our grandson," but the officer's face didn't change. "Please step aside, ma'am." From inside, Walter's voice thundered. "What's going on?" The officers entered. I couldn't see much from where I was parked, but moments later, Walter came out in handcuffs, shouting, "This is ridiculous! She's lying! That woman's poisoned that kid's head!" His wife followed, her face red and twisted in anger. The neighbors had started to gather. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "Irene and Walter, no way." I stayed low, heart racing. It wasn't joy I felt, not yet. It was disbelief. Relief mixed with the deep ache of everything it had taken to get here. Then I saw David's car pull up at the end of the street. He jumped out, panic already written across his face. "Mom! Dad!" he yelled, running toward them as the officers led them to the patrol car. "What the hell is this?" I watched from behind my tinted windows, unseen. The officer turned to him. "Are you Mr. David Harris?" "Yes," he snapped. "I suggest you come with us, sir. You may need to make a statement." David looked like he wanted to argue, but something in the officer's eyes stopped him. He turned, scanning the street, and for one terrifying moment, I thought he saw me. But then his phone rang. He answered it, pacing, his voice loud and desperate. "I'll fix this," he shouted into the receiver. "I'll fix everything." The door slammed on the patrol car, and his parents were gone. That afternoon, I got the call I'd been waiting for. "Mrs. Harris," Detective Harper said, "Child Protective Services has officially suspended visitation rights for David's parents. Your son is safe. And the DA's office is pressing charges. They've reviewed the footage you provided. It's airtight." I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall. For the first time in months, I could breathe. "Thank you," I whispered. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Because David wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. I peeked through the peephole and froze. It was him, David. He looked nothing like the man I used to know. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched. Rage radiated from him like heat from a fire. "Julia!" he shouted, pounding the door. "We need to talk." I didn't move. "Open the door." When I didn't respond, his voice softened. "Please, Julia. For Ethan's sake, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I cracked the door open an inch. "What do you want?" "David?" he smiled, that same cold, confident smile that used to make my stomach twist. "You've gone too far," he said. "Do you even realize what you've done? You got my parents arrested. My mother is in the hospital from the stress. My father's job." "Your parents locked our son in a basement," I interrupted, my voice trembling with anger. "That's not true," he shouted, slamming his hand against the doorframe. "He's making it up because you're feeding him lies." I stepped back, shaking. "I have video evidence, David, from your parents' house. Do you want to see it?" For the first time, his face faltered. His eyes widened slightly, a crack in his perfect composure. "You... what?" "Hidden cameras," I said, my voice low but steady. "Everything is on record." He stepped back, running his hand through his hair, his breathing ragged. "You're insane, Julia. You broke the law. I protected my son," I shot back. "Something you should have done a long time ago." For a moment, we just stood there, the silence between us electric, dangerous. Then he sneered. "You think you've won? You've ruined my family, Julia. You'll regret this." He turned and stormed off, slamming his car door so hard it echoed down the street. I watched him drive away, my heart racing, not from fear this time, but from a strange, fierce sense of power. He could threaten all he wanted. The truth was already out. That night, Ethan crawled into my bed. "Mom," he whispered, "are they gone forever?" I stroked his hair gently. "Yes, sweetheart. They can't hurt you anymore." He sighed and nestled closer. "I had a dream they locked me in that room again. But then you came and broke the door." Tears filled my eyes. "That's right, baby. I'll always break the door for you." He smiled sleepily and drifted off, his small hand still clutching mine. And in that moment, for the first time in a long, long time, I felt safe too. The next morning, I woke up to a soft knock on the door. When I opened it, Detective Harper stood there with a file in his hand. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "we wanted you to see this. The DA's office approved the final statement. It's officially over." Inside the file was the summary: "Case closed. Custody awarded. Julia Harris." The words blurred through my tears. It was finally done. All the fear, the sleepless nights, the pain, it had led to this. Freedom. I thought it was over. The case was closed, the custody papers signed, and the heavy shadow that had followed me for so long was finally lifting. For the first time in months, Ethan slept soundly through the night. No more nightmares, no more screams echoing down the hallway. But peace, real peace, never comes so easily. 3 nights later, as rain hammered against the windows, my phone started to ring. The number was unknown. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A voice crackled through the line, low and trembling. "Julia, it's me. David." I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. "What do you want?" "I need to talk to you. Please, just once." "I have nothing left to say to you," I snapped. He exhaled sharply. "It's not about us. It's about Ethan." Those words hit like a lightning bolt. "Where are you?" I asked carefully. "Outside. I'm in the car." I rushed to the window. His dark sedan sat under the streetlight, rain streaking down its windshield like tears. For a moment, I considered calling the police, but something, maybe exhaustion, maybe curiosity, made me grab my coat and step outside. The rain was cold and relentless. I walked slowly toward the car, each step echoing in the quiet street. When I reached the door, he rolled down the window. He looked terrible. Eyes bloodshot, beard unshaven, his clothes wrinkled. "Julia," he said softly, "I didn't come to fight." "Then why are you here?" I asked, my arms crossed. He stared at the steering wheel for a long time before speaking. "I saw the footage, the one from the basement. I didn't believe it at first. I couldn't." "So you finally looked," I said bitterly. He nodded slowly. "I went to the house after the arrest. The cops left it unlocked. I saw the chain, the blanket, the plate." His voice cracked. "My son was down there, my own son." For a moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Guilt, real, raw guilt. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have listened. I should have protected him. And you." I didn't say anything. I just stood there in the rain, my heart torn between fury and heartbreak. "You didn't protect anyone, David," I said finally. "You chose them over us." "I know." His voice broke. "I thought they loved him. I thought they were strict because they cared. I didn't want to believe I cut him off. You didn't want to believe because it was easier to ignore. Because admitting the truth meant admitting you failed." He lowered his head, water dripping from his hair. "You're right." The street was silent except for the rain. I took a deep breath, my anger slowly cooling into something else. Closure. "Why are you really here, David?" I asked finally. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. "For you." "And for him?" I hesitated before taking it. Inside was a folded letter and a small silver pendant, Ethan's old baby necklace, the one David's mother had taken years ago for safekeeping. "I found it when I went back," he said. "She kept it in a box labeled Discipline." I felt sick. "She hurt him, Julia," he said, his voice breaking again. And I let it happen. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed to say this. I believe you now. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I whispered, "It's too late." He nodded slowly. "I know," he started the engine. "I'm leaving town. I need to get away, clear my head. Maybe I'll never come back." "Good," I said softly, "because we're done being afraid of you." He looked at me one last time, eyes full of regret. "Tell Ethan I'm sorry." I turned away without replying. By the time I looked back, his car was gone. Later that night, when Ethan was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the letter. David's handwriting was shaky. "Uneven, Julia. You were right about everything. I was too proud, too blind, too cowardly. My parents broke me long before they broke our family. I thought their way was love, but it was control, the same control I tried to use on you. I'm sorry for every bruise, every lie, every moment I made you feel small. You were the strongest person I ever knew. You still are. Take care of Ethan. Tell him his father finally learned what love really means, even if it's too late to show it." David, I stared at the words until they blurred into tears. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't undo what he'd done, but for the first time, I felt something close to peace. A week later, Ethan and I moved into a small apartment by the coast. The bakery across the street filled the mornings with the smell of fresh bread, and the ocean breeze carried away the last fragments of the past. One afternoon, we walked down to the beach. Ethan ran ahead, chasing seagulls, his laughter echoing through the salty air. He turned and waved. "Mom, look, the waves are huge," I smiled. "Just don't go too far." As I watched him play, I realized something. The pain, the fear, the heartbreak, they were all part of our story. But they no longer defined us. We were survivors, and survivors don't just move on, they rebuild. That night, as the sun set behind the horizon, Ethan crawled into my lap, his head resting against my chest. "Mom?" He whispered sleepily. "Are we happy now?" I kissed his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, we are. And for the first time in a very long time." I meant it. The months that followed felt like waking from a long, dark dream. At first, the quiet was strange. I'd spent so long living in constant fear of my husband's temper, fear of his parents' cruelty, fear for my son. That silence felt like something foreign. But slowly, I began to learn what peace sounded like. It was the sound of Ethan's laughter echoing through our small apartment, the rustle of sea breeze through the curtains every morning, the soft hum of the kettle as I made tea at sunrise, without anyone yelling in the background. Peace, I realized, wasn't loud or triumphant. It was gentle. It crept in like a whisper, wrapping itself around the scars we carried. Ethan started therapy. At first, he barely spoke, but his therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Bennett, had patience that could move mountains. After a few sessions, he began to open up, little by little. "Grandma said if I told you," he whispered one day during therapy, "she'd lock me in the dark forever." My heart cracked all over again. But I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I smiled softly and said, "You're safe now. She can't hurt you anymore." Dr. Bennett nodded at me approvingly. "You're doing great, Ethan." It was small progress, but it was progress. Every session was a step toward healing. As for me, I found strength in rebuilding my independence. I started a small home bakery, something I'd dreamed of for years, but never dared attempt while living under David's control. The first batch of cinnamon rolls came out uneven, slightly burnt on the edges, but the smell filled the apartment with warmth. Ethan helped decorate them, his tiny fingers smearing icing across the counter. "Mom, we should name it," he said with a grin. I laughed. "Name what, the mess or the bakery?" He giggled. "Both." And that's how Sweet Freedom Bakery was born. Our neighbors quickly became regulars. They'd stop by in the mornings for coffee and pastries. And every time someone complimented my baking, I felt a piece of myself come back. "You've got a gift?" "Julia," one woman said as she bit into a croissant. "You should open a real shop," I smiled. "Maybe one day. Because for now, I wasn't chasing success. I was chasing peace, and that was enough." One Saturday morning, as I kneaded dough by the window, Ethan sat at the table, drawing with his crayons. He looked up suddenly and said, "Mom, can we visit the ocean again?" "Of course," I said. "Why?" He shrugged. I feel happy there, like Grandma can't find me." That sentence hit me like a gentle wave, painful but cleansing. I knelt beside him and held his hand. "You never have to be afraid again, sweetheart. The ocean is big, and so is the world. We're free now." He smiled, a real pure smile. Free. That afternoon we went to the beach. The sky was painted gold, the waves glistening like melted sunlight. Ethan ran to the edge of the water, his feet sinking into the wet sand. "Mom! Look!" he shouted, holding up a seashell. "It's shaped like a heart." I walked over and took it from him, turning it in my hands. "It's beautiful," I said. "You should keep it." He placed it in my palm. "No, it's for you. Because you fixed everything." My throat tightened. "I didn't fix everything, sweetheart. But we fixed each other." He hugged me tightly, and for a moment, I felt the weight of every tear, every bruise, every sleepless night melt away in the sun. Weeks passed, and life began to take on a new rhythm. One evening, as I was closing the bakery window, I noticed an envelope tucked under the door. There was no name on it, just a small, simple heart drawn in black ink. I opened it carefully. Inside was a short note. "Julia, I'm leaving for good. The investigation is over. I'm moving overseas to start again. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'll be sending child support monthly, not because the court demands it, but because I owe it to Ethan. He deserves a better man than I was. Tell him that his father is trying to change." Davide folded the note and set it aside. No tears came, just quiet understanding, because maybe, in some strange way, that was its own kind of justice, not revenge, but realization. A few months later, Dr. Bennett asked Ethan to write a letter to his past self. He came home that evening and showed it to me shyly. "Dear old me, you don't have to hide anymore. The dark room is gone. You have Mom, you have cookies. You have light. Love, knew me I couldn't speak." I just hugged him, holding him tight, my tears falling into his hair, because that was it. The ending I had dreamed of, the healing we fought so hard to reach. That night, after tucking Ethan into bed, I stood by the window, watching the moonlight dance on the waves. Life hadn't given me the story I'd expected, but it had given me something better, strength, and maybe that was the point all along. We can't choose who breaks us, but we can choose who we become afterward. I whispered softly into the quiet night. "Thank you, life, for giving me another chance." And somewhere in that silence, I swear I heard my mother's voice. Calm, proud, and full of love. "You did well. Julia, you did well." The night air was cool when I stepped onto the balcony. Waves rolled against the shore in slow, steady breaths, each one pulling a little more pain out of me. Behind me, Ethan was asleep, a small fortress of stuffed animals protecting him from old ghosts. I leaned on the railing and closed my eyes. For months, I had lived waiting for the next blow, the next shout, the next lie. Now there was only the rhythm of the sea. Peace at last. But peace doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without bleeding. The next morning, the bakery bell jingled as the first customers arrived. Ethan was already at the counter, proudly wearing his tiny apron that read Assistant Baker. "Mom," he whispered, "today we should make something special. What do you have in mind?" He grinned. "Heart-shaped cookies. For people who feel sad," I laughed. "That's a wonderful idea." So we rolled the dough together, pressed the little hearts, and dusted them with sugar. When the first tray came out golden and warm, Ethan handed one to a woman who'd come in crying quietly after a phone call. "Here," he said softly. "This will help." She smiled through her tears. "Thank you, sweetheart." And in that simple moment, I realized my son had already learned what took me decades to understand. That kindness is the real inheritance we leave behind. That afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the window, I wrote a letter in my journal, not to David, not to his parents, but to every woman who might someday stand where I once stood. Dear you, if you're reading this and you think you're trapped, you're not. There is always a door, even if someone told you it doesn't exist. Sometimes you have to build it yourself. The day you choose peace over fear, the world will begin to open for you. It won't be easy. Healing never is. But you'll breathe again. You'll laugh again. And one day you'll wake up and realize you're free. Love, Julia. I folded the page and slipped it between the first recipes of Sweet Freedom Bakery. Maybe someday. Another broken soul would find it and know they weren't alone. That evening, Ethan and I went to the beach one last time before winter. He ran ahead, chasing the gulls, his laughter scattering across the wind. "Mom," he called, waving his arms. "Race you to the water!" I kicked off my shoes and ran after him, the cold sand soft under my feet. We reached the edge at the same time, waves splashing over our ankles. Ethan laughed so hard he almost fell. "You cheated!" I laughed too, breathless. Maybe I did. He looked up at me, face glowing in the sunset. "Mom, promise we'll never go back there?" I crouched and held his face in my hands. "Never. That place doesn't exist for us anymore." He nodded, satisfied, and took my hand as the tide washed over our footprints, erasing the past. That night, when we got home, I posted a photo on the bakery's page. Ethan holding a tray of heart-shaped cookies, smiling like sunlight. The caption read, "Sometimes the smallest hands rebuild the biggest hearts." Within hours, messages began to pour in. "Your story gave me courage. I'm leaving tonight. I thought I was alone. Thank you." I sat there reading each one, tears blurring the screen. Every message was another voice breaking free. Another life deciding to start again. Maybe that was the real ending. Not revenge, not even justice, but connection. Weeks later, the bakery sign glowed warmly in the evening fog. Sweet Freedom. Home is here. Inside, Ethan was humming while stacking boxes. A couple of neighbors waved through the window. The smell of cinnamon and sugar floated into the street, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to dream. Not of escape, but of future, because survival isn't the last chapter. It's the first page of everything that comes next. As I turned off the lights, Ethan yawned and took my hand. "Mom," he whispered, "you know what I think?" "What?" "That God didn't forget us. He was just waiting for you to be ready." I smiled through my tears. "Maybe you're right, sweetheart. Maybe he was." We walked upstairs together, hand in hand, leaving the scent of warm bread and second chances behind us. And as the moon rose over the quiet town, I knew our story wasn't about pain anymore. It was about peace and love, and a boy who taught his mother how to live again. If this story touched your heart, let me know in the comments. What would you have done in Julia's place? Your words might help someone else find the courage to change their life today. Don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories every week. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never stop believing in second chances.